been an interesting weekend. I took a break, a couple days off from the videos. I was gonna do one yesterday, but I decided to chill out because I had more research to do. Because the whole narrative of the whole plandemic, as we are coming to know it, just doesn't add up. And like a dog with a bone, I couldn't let it go. I've been at this for weeks. And I've been looking up in my skies very suspiciously. And even with all the diversion of the virus, and then everything that is emerging from that, which is everything in our lives, I'm finding myself back to solar radiation management. Because the symptoms that are on our respective self-assessments to decide if you should go for a COVID-19 test seem to be pointing us in a completely different direction than a virus, and actually guiding people that don't have COVID-19, but are actually experiencing something completely different in those lung issues that many are suffering from, but we're not hearing about in the news. It's confusing. And how I got to know a lot of the people in the truth community was really through my efforts in the solar geoengineering end of things. I was marketing the truth about a program called solar radiation management that I had come to understand was in effect, but it wasn't official. I knew it was in effect because my own lungs. And that's how I was guided to a whole lot of other people that were feeling the same thing in their lungs. And we found ourselves on Global Chemtrails Skywatch or one of those boards. And that's how I got to learn. Reading the comments, in fact. I got pretty good at determining who was a troll, and there were many. All designed to keep people in a box. But as I merged out of that and started to create my own networks, the world opened up to me with a lot of other people that were even further ahead than I was. In fact, way ahead. When all this virus started, I did a video because I was looking into sulfur dioxide as a result of my own personal experience here. I had just arrived home from Ecuador. And there I came to discover that there was a gas refining plant. And there was also a lot of very unusual clouds. And in fact, many of the same symptoms I had been experiencing at home with shortness of breath. Now I'm asthmatic, so I have a rescue, my inhaler, that I can take, and it opens up those passageways. When I came home, I started digging into the whole greenhouse gas, being that 95% of the greenhouse gases are actually from water vapor. The 3% of the greenhouse gas pie, or 3.5, is like CO2. Again, the scam continues because the scam is built on a scam. Just like the COVID plan, everything is layers and layers deep. And it twists and it turns. There's a lot of intrigue. That's probably why I enjoy doing this so much. It's not like work at all. And in fact, I am turning this into my work. I decided I was going to do that in September, that come hell or high water, I was going to expose truth and I was going to be able to at least make a living on it. I don't need a lot because I truly enjoy it. I enjoy the intrigue, even though it's dark, and it can be. But we need to figure out what's going on because it's our future and it's also the future of humanity. And that's where my interest lies. Now, when I got home, I took a drive through our gas refinery here and I duct taped my camera on the window. So when I drove by, there was protesters out there at the time, which in fact is another interesting feature of the plandemic. It shut down this protest and they're no longer doing that. They're just home now. In any case, I filmed the water vapor. And that day, as I drove through, I was thinking, oh my God, the stench is just horrid. And how are these guys standing out in all of this? In fact, by the time I made it through where the plant is and out to the grid road, and I got out to take pictures, I had a headache. I felt nauseous. It wasn't good. And then I drove back through for one more go at the shots. And after that, I didn't feel very well. In fact, I actually ended up in bed. I struggled through the next day. And for 2 days, I was in bed. Now, I'm an ultra sensitive, though. I had a bit of a temperature, but the rest of the symptoms weren't aligning. And what was interesting was, I don't know if anybody's watched Crowdsource for Truth, but he did a walkabout New York last week. And he was talking about the Dr. Colleen, who was I called her the rat of the New York Times, because I really believe that she was putting it on right from the get-go. But one of the symptoms she talked about that no one else was talking about was the abdominal pain. And I had that, which is what led me to looking at Wuhan's sulfur dioxide levels, because I knew that there was a gas refining operation that was actually retrofitting to comply with the new, or to provide a market, moreover, or the actual product for the market, because all of a sudden it was deemed by the global authorities that you must seriously reduce the sulfur in the diesel. And that process creates sulfur dioxide, in which is also used for solar radiation management, or the concept originally by David Keith. Now, I know this is going to get confusing for a lot of people who don't follow geoengineering or solar radiation management. And what I found interesting over these really the last few months, I started to think about why sulfur dioxide was never mentioned or being mentioned in all of the materials I was seeing coming through on those boards. And we were focusing on aluminum, barium, strontium, all these other chemicals, which we know are there. But the big one, kind of like the water vapor in the greenhouse gas pie, was seemingly missing from the equation. And it's huge. Right now, there's a whole market glut of sulfur dioxide because of all of this marine diesel fuel that has to be desulfurized. I'm not a chemist. I'm just trying to put this in terms, so please bear with me on that frontier. But what I know about these chemicals is kind of like the playbook, because this is a biotech playbook that we're going by right now. And we need to get ourselves in the game. The Biotech Playbook basically was the playbook that took chemicals used to gas people in the Second World War and created a market for it in foods as pesticides and herbicides. Sulfur dioxide provides a market for solar radiation management, which is actually spraying the stratosphere so that it actually blocks out the sun by creating that cloud cover. Of course, in the trails to start, and as they spread, they create the cover. And then, of course, the sulfur dioxide actually basically bounces the light back, or the energy, in which they do want to harvest up there in space. There's a plan for that, and we're going to get to that. Now, the thing is, what I cannot deny, because I watch flight radar every single day, is the last month, more than weeks, because for weeks I've been talking about the weeks, the cargo jets are out of control. They're one after another. If you go to my Facebook, and I really encourage you to do that, I'll leave the links below, and I should do that on every video. I'll get better at that. But I'm sharing these SO2 masks and then flight radars to show you what is actually happening. And I can tell you, this is 3 or 4 times the volume I ever saw before. And when you look at that SO2, you will actually see a correlation between the flight patterns, which tells me that solar radiation management is actually full on now, and not subject to regulations, because you know who is in control. And under this new regime we are all subscribing, and few people understand, is that there's no oversight. Because, well, everybody's in isolation, and I'm just being funny, but it's not required. So all of these sketchy programs are allowed to go. As an asthmatic, I discovered that there was a Ventolin shortage in my province. And then I discovered that this actually is going to be a global thing. It's not just Canada, it's everywhere. Apparently when they intubate, I came across a website, and I still have to qualify this, but it was the World Socialist website. I'm not a socialist, but I read what they say. They were talking about the impact on the poor, on the vulnerable, like people that rely on this medication, that there would be a shortage. Yes. Because when they intubate, they're using the Ventolin or the salbutamol, which is the active, as a sedative. And then we're hearing about how the intubation is actually contrary to it all. Now, I'm going to tell you, when I was a child and ended up in the hospital a month a year, 2 weeks in the fall and 2 weeks in the spring, every single year from the time I was 5 to 17. I would end up under oxygen. If the inhaler didn't work, that's where I would go, under oxygen. And then they would nebulize the Ventolin. We were never intubated, but we were dealing with an irritant, a chemical irritant. And I believe this is why we're hearing these stories, that this is actually contrary. And in fact, that the first page of our self-assessments that describe a tight chest, heaviness, not being able to breathe, is actually a chemical reaction to what's going on, which again further justifies and qualifies the fact that we're really not worried about a virus. We're worried about what's going on outside. And the reason they're keeping us inside, or part of the reason, is that it will actually hurt people, this practice. If you were a person like me that is prepared with a Ventolin to counteract it and understands it, and all of a sudden you get hit by the irritant, you're not going to be able to breathe. And I can manage that because I'm used to the phenomenon of not breathing. But people who aren't, what happens is they get flipped into a state of fear. And that shuts it down even further. I'm interested to find out how many people are actually filling out those self-assessments and actually maybe getting a test and leaving with an inhaler. I believe this is a thing, and I believe it's more than a thing. I distrust this whole virus thing, and because, see, part of that Biotech Playbook is the next part is for us, and that's the vaccines. That's where this is going to come in. The 12 to 18 months to stay inside is really about, number one, keeping us contained when we start asking questions. When things aren't making sense anymore. When we've lost our summer. When the money starts to run out. The next playbook is kind of like chemical farming. It's the same very principles. Vaccines are, again, a creation of biotech. So just like those farmers spraying the poison on the food, and again, there are pests to be managed for sure, but you know what? The organic guys, they do it too, and they do it without. So again, being organic, it's very difficult on a huge, huge scale, like these chemical farmers are on. In chemical farming, what they do is they don't just go, oh, you know, pests or fungus, let's spray. No, they have so much land that it's part of the program, okay? So it's a program that, again, believes everything's diseased and has to be amended or treated in order to maintain crop health. On the vaccine side, where our governments and Bill Gates and you know who is putting us in the box of is all of us are considered to be diseased, every one of us, until we are vaccinated. That we won't be able to participate in society because we'll be deemed dirty. That we can't be trusted to get on a plane. And the fact that a single person could crash an economy. Now, Mila, I know that it took a well-coordinated effort to crash our economies. They did it all, and they're all in on it. And part of this new strategy in dealing with people is that we will be just like the herd, and that's where that whole herd immunity comes in, that one of us will compromise the health of everyone else. I'm going to tell you something. I didn't put this back together with one of their remedies. In fact, it was when I turned my back 100% on the medical profession and started going to foreign nations over 10 years ago. And when I needed to see a doctor, that's when I would go. And they actually listened to me. And then I could go about my treatment. That's what I did. Because I know that this strategy, although it's helpful for insurance companies and helpful for the government and helpful for the AI and all their metrics, it's absolutely detrimental to me. And it's detrimental to a lot of people. This is not our strategy. And we are going to, or they're going to try, to force us to comply. I intend to rip that apart because I'm not a cow, and nor are you, and nor are your children. In the old days, if we got cancer, we could say, hey, you know what? You can do the surgery, but I'm not doing the chemo. And I know many people who did that and are still alive today because of it. Yet, in our new model, that's not going to work. This is where we need to be establishing our medical freedom, because it is going to follow us for a long, long time. And I'm not going to allow them to do me in before my time. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Of course, I'm going to continue researching and digging in every single day, because what's happening is being laid out right before our very eyes. We need to understand that us being relegated into various states of isolation all around the world, over 3 billion people, we're being manipulated. And it's all so that we can be tagged like animals and managed like animals. And I'm not going to allow it.